Hey, in today's lesson, we are looking at 10 very practical tips to help you improve your reading skills in English. Let's go. First up, learn to skim and learn to scan. Now, skimming and scanning are two very important and useful reading skills that you should develop. So skimming is when you basically look over a text very quickly in order to get the general idea or the general concept of what that text is about before you read it in detail. So to do this, you can kind of look at the first sentence of each paragraph, use subtitles or subheadings or any phrases that might be in bold or that jump out to you in certain texts, just to help you get an overall understanding. This way, when you read the text in more detail, it's going to be much easier for you. Now, scanning, on the other hand, is a different skill. When you scan a text, it means you look through it quickly in order to find specific bits of information that you need. Now, these skills are useful in different situations in real life. Whenever you need to thoroughly understand a text, skimming it first is really going to help you do that. And when you need to just pick out specific bits of information that you need, but not everything is important, let's say you're looking through a report and you just need one piece of information. In that case, you're going to scan through the report and find that piece of information that you need. So these two skills, very, very helpful. Next, learn to analyze the structure of different texts that you are reading. Analyze the structure. Pay attention to how the introduction is formed, how your paragraphs are formed, how your conclusion is formed, how ideas are developed, where your main ideas are stated, and so on. Analyzing the structure of a text or a passage that you're reading will help you to understand it better, but it will also help you to develop your own writing skills. Whenever you read anything in English, it has been organized and planned in a logical way or in an intentional way. So if writing or organizing your thoughts is difficult for you, start to pay attention to how other writers structure their work, and this will help you when it comes to your own writing in English. Next, you can use reading to expand your English vocabulary. When you're reading, keep an eye out for new words, phrases, idioms, phrasal verbs, expressions that you see. It's especially important to keep an eye out for new vocabulary that you see being used often, okay? So if you see a certain word or a certain phrase that is being repeated in a text, chances are that that word or that phrase is important. Now, you do not need to learn every single new word and every single new phrase that you come across, but a general rule of thumb to keep in mind is that if you see a word or phrase being used again and again, it's something you see frequently, either in one text or one passage, or just in general, it means that that word or that phrase is important and it's definitely worth learning. If you don't understand a word or a phrase and because of that you cannot understand what you're reading, then of course you need to look it up. But if you can kind of guess the meaning of the word or phrase in context and you get the overall meaning, you don't necessarily need to stop and look up the word, okay? So you do need to learn to use your discretion here, and this is also a skill that can be developed. So don't just start by looking up every single new word or phrase that you see, because this is going to stop you from reading. Instead, start off by focusing a little bit more on new words and phrases that you see being used often. Okay, that's a good starting point. Next, practice reading out loud, not silently in your head only. Okay, so when you're reading something, read it in your head first. You can read it silently because that will help you to understand what it's about. Then read it again and read out loud. Reading out loud gives you the chance to practice your intonation, your pronunciation, your fluency, and it helps to reinforce what you understood when you read to yourself in your head, okay? So a nice practice is to read in your head first, get an understanding, and then read out loud. Okay. And this is something to keep in mind, even in a group class or a group setting. Whenever I have given my students a reading task, I always give them some time to read it silently, to read it to themselves first, to give them that foundation, that understanding before reading out loud. If you see a text for the first time in a different language that is not your language, and somebody says, "Here, read this," you will look at it, you'll start reading it, but while you read out loud, you are not necessarily able to understand the meaning of the text. You're more focused on getting the words right, not making mistakes, not messing up your pronunciation, and so on. So it is really important before you practice reading out loud to read in your head to yourself, get that understanding, and then the second step is to read out loud. Next, explore. Read different things. Now, this doesn't mean read everything. It just means read different things. So try reading different types of text like fiction, nonfiction, newspapers, magazines, blog posts, posts on social media, and so on. There's so many different things that you can read. Now, it is important to read about different topics, to read things that are written in different styles. So an example I gave was fiction and nonfiction. So fiction and nonfiction are going to be written in a very different way, in a very different style. If you read poetry and you read a news article, these are going to be written in a completely different style. So try to diversify the topics and the styles and the type of things that you are reading. You can read about things that interest you, things that you need to learn about, things that will help you in the future. You can read things that are related to your work or your hobbies. You can read short stories, you can read novels. The possibilities are endless. Just try to switch it up. And the reason for this is that when we get comfortable with one thing, we can kind of master that one thing, but at a point, we're going to stop growing. Okay, so if you only read news articles are good, of course. However, you're going to become very used to this one style of writing. And then you might want to read something like a science fiction novel, for instance, or a mystery novel. That's going to be a big challenge for you if you are not used to different styles of writing. Your brain receives the information in a different way. So it is important to kind of exercise different ways of thinking about text when you look at it. And this can be done by changing up the things you read. Next, try listening and reading together. When you read and listen at the same time, you are able to hear the correct pronunciation of a word. This is going to help you with your pronunciation. You're also going to hear the intonation and the tone of how something is read. Okay? The way that you speak, the way that you read helps your listener to better understand you. So even the way that I'm speaking now, my tone, my intonation goes up and down. I pause. I give you short phrases at once. And all of these little details are intentional. This will help you to become a better speaker in general. And this will also help your listener or your audience to understand you. So there's so much more you can do with reading than just reading and understanding what you're reading, right? There's so many other skills that are connected or intertwined with reading. Now, if you want to listen and read at the same time, you can try audiobooks. So you can listen to a book being read and also read the physical book as well at the same time. This is a great exercise to do. You can also watch videos or lectures online where there is a transcript available, and you can listen and watch the video and read the transcript simultaneously as well. Next, get the gist. Get the gist. Now, get the gist means to get the overall meaning of something. And by this, I mean, when you are reading a longer text, a longer article, try to focus on getting the gist of what it's about. Get the general meaning, the general points, the main ideas. Don't focus so heavily on tiny little details. Now, of course, there are going to be times when you do need to understand every detail. Let's say you're reading a technical report at work, or it's something that is very important at work. Of course, you're going to have to understand every detail. But let's say that you are reading a novel or a book or a short story just for fun. In a case like this, you should focus on the main point, the main idea, and don't let words or phrases that you don't understand get in the way and stop you. okay? Of course, you can always go back and read more than once and then kind of refocus on anything that you didn't get the first time. But the first time you read something for fun, this is the key, try to focus on the main idea as a general meaning. Which brings us to our next point, reread. I've already mentioned a couple times in today's lesson that it is okay to read something again. In fact, I encourage you to reread a text whenever you can, especially if you're trying to improve your English, your comprehension, or your reading skills. The first time that you read something, get the gist, get the main idea, and then the second time you read something, focus on anything that you didn't quite understand or that was a little unclear or new or challenging for you. You can underline it. The third time you read, you want to look up those words, you want to look up those phrases, spend a little more time studying the text, analyzing the text, looking at how different structures work together, how different vocabulary words and phrases are being used, okay? So you can reread a text as many times as you want to or need to in order to get the level of understanding that you need, okay? So if it's a story for fun, you can just read it once, maybe twice, make sure you get the main idea. If it is something more important, you can read and reread as many times as you need to. Also, with this point, I want to remind you to be patient with yourself. Don't feel bad if you read something the first time and you don't get it. That is okay. There is no rule that says you have to understand something the first time you read it or the first time you listen to it. Be patient with yourself. Give yourself a chance to read it as many times as you need to. Break down the text into smaller sections if you need to. That's totally fine. Just go over it as many times as you need. Next, start small. Now, this point is specifically for those of you who are not big readers or are just getting started with reading in English, or you don't have that much time, whatever the case may be. In general, I recommend that if you're just starting out, you start with shorter, manageable text that you can actually finish. So this would be things like blog posts, magazine or news articles, maybe social media captions, so anything that is short and you can finish it. It is very important that when you're just getting started, you start off with things that are manageable because it gives you a sense of accomplishment when you finish something. If you start something and it's really hard or it's really long and you just can't finish it, this is discouraging. This becomes overwhelming. This gets frustrating. It makes you feel bad and you want to stop. So many times I have seen people feel motivated, feel excited, go out and buy a very long, thick novel, a book. They bring it home. They're like, okay, let's read this. And they open it up. They read the first page, the first few paragraphs, and they realize, okay, this is hard. There's a lot of new words. There's a lot of things I don't understand. I've never read this style before. And they get a little bit frustrated. So to avoid this, if you're just getting started, you want to start off with shorter text. When you feel comfortable, when you feel confident, work your way up to longer things, short stories, longer articles, and eventually books. And finally, reflect and review. Now, this is a tip or a step that a lot of people just forget about or don't think about. If you are reading with the intention of improving your English, you want to make sure you leave yourself time to review what you have read, to reflect on what you have read, to think about what you have read, to revisit what you have read. A lot of times people read something, they're like, okay, cool, I get it, and they put it to the side and it's out of sight, out of mind. They basically forget about it. However, it's really going to help you if you give yourself time to think about what you have read and reflect on it. This can be done by writing a summary, writing a response to what you have read. And this practice of writing a summary or writing a response to something you have read gives you the chance to interact with that text. It gives you the chance to review the points, to think about the information that you have received, and to produce something in English as well. So there you have it, 10 very practical tips that you can put into practice today to improve your reading skills in English. Now, if you have any other tips that you would like to share with us, or any specific material or content that you enjoy reading in English, please do share that with us in the comments. If you enjoyed today's lesson and you learned something new, make sure to give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment to let me know, and subscribe to the channel because this helps the channel and the videos here to reach English learners all around the world, and we can help as many people as possible. So thank you so much for watching, learning, and spending time here with me today. I'll see you very soon in another lesson.